Welcome to the Maria Sanchez Show. Hi, we're live. It's 4 o'clock. It's Tuesday, November 16th, and thank you so much for joining us. We are getting a loyal group of followers, but most of the folks are watching us on the archives, which is fine. We don't care how you watch us. Just watch us. And we're responding to the needs of the community and the county. Last night, we were privileged to be invited and to attend the Henry L. Hank Lacayo Institute that was unveiled and launched at Cal State University's Channel Islands. We're going to show you that footage not immediately after our broadcast today, but a little bit later on tonight, and then it'll be available for you to watch at your leisure should you so choose. What was amazing, we've participated in a couple of events that have been exceedingly poignant to me because it puts our life and our choices into some kind of historical perspective. But again, Hank Lacayo, a Conejo Valley, Ventura County longtime resident, illustrious career, 33 years with the United Auto Workers, and now leading something called Senior Concerns for the state of California. Might have that title around almost for 10 years. 4 children. Anyway, Southern California Edison gave a grant of $300,000 to Cal State University Channel Islands to establish the Henry L. Hank Lacayo Institute. And it's just an amazing, it probably is going to be the only one of its kind in California. So we're going to show that in a little bit later tonight. But without further ado, watch what happens on live television. Come on in. We have our guest today. He's going to walk right in front of me.
Hi, how are you?
Darling.
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I got a ticket on the...
How do you like it? So we have in studio with us Paul Provenza, and this is the Two Shot, as you see.
Hi.
And so we don't mind because it's live TV at its best. So
Great.
It's totally cool.
Excellent.
I keep saying to people, this is a real reality show.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not shooting hours and hours and hours and then editing it to create drama that doesn't exist.
Can I go to the bathroom right now?
You may.
Come back? No. I'm gonna do it.
Whatever. So I was about to introduce you and talk about what we are going to talk about and why you're here, and you're blowing through Ventura County to get to Santa Barbara for your event tonight.
Yeah.
So I'll let you share all of that. But I wanted our viewers to know a little bit about your career. And we've pulled some pictures that we thought maybe you could talk about. But before we do that, Rod, not yet.
Career is a strong word.
It's a big, long word. And you have endured.
I wouldn't call it a career.
Yeah.
A career implies some sort of linearity.
But you have longevity.
Because the option isn't very good.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But other than that, I actually at one point was very frustrated with the business aspects of comedy, and decided that I was going to leave the business, and came to the horrible realization that I'm not qualified to do anything else. I have a 30-year gap on my resume. That's really hard to talk away.
Yeah, except for, as everyone knows, well, or should know, and if they don't know, Paul Provenza, stand-up comic, actor, writer, director, author.
Footstool, lampshade. I do light housework if you need something done. You need somebody to serve drinks at a party.
It's affectionately called hyphenate.
It is a hyphenate.
Yes.
Which also, I think, Epstein-Barr is also a hyphenate, so I don't know how good that is.
Okay, now stop with your self-deprecation. Talk to us about how you decided a man and a mic.
A man and a mic. Well, I've been doing comedy since I was about 7 or 8 years old. When I was a kid, I used to sit around with my grandmother after family dinners on Sundays, and we'd all sit around and watch the Ed Sullivan Show because she didn't speak English very well, or claimed not to, and there's Dancing Bears and Topo Gigio on Ed Sullivan, so we would all sit around and watch that. So as a kid, I was steeped in the stand-up comedians that were on every Ed Sullivan Show. And at a very, very young age, around like 7 or 8, I remember focusing in on that performer, that performance, that style of performing. The one person and all those people are just hanging on every word. How brilliant. And for somebody who, obviously when I was a kid, I felt like nobody would listen to me no matter what. And I came from a very children should be seen, not heard kind of childhood. And so I fell in love with that form. And then actually, really what happened was that I had amblyopia or lazy eye. Had surgery when I was about 8 years old. I had an eye patch for many, many years.
Really?
Yes, and because I
Wait,
was...
They cover up the eye that's well so that it makes the weak eye work?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. In tandem with all sorts of eye exercises, which I had to do X number of times a day, which meant that anytime I was out playing with friends, I always had to come back in and do these eye exercises and surgery. And I had no depth perception because I only had one eye that I was using. So I was constantly bumping into things and falling down and breaking my glasses. And so instead of getting new glasses, because I should be more careful, I had to have a big hunk of Scotch tape on them. And it was not pleasant. And
it sounds like your quintessential bucolic, perfect upbringing.
but here's where it gets directly related. That I remember going to the movies with my family to see The Nutty Professor, Jerry Lewis, and I'm sitting there watching this man who was a movie star and people loved him and people just adored him. And I thought, all he's doing is everything that I'm getting in trouble for. So I thought, there's something there. If I make it look like it's my idea and go with it and make it funny,
did you really have that seminal moment?
I actually remember having
Thinking
that thought process.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're how old then? 12?
I was about 7, 8.
Oh, still young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would just start doing and saying funny things specifically to be funny, which worked, except I would still get in trouble for it, but at least I had something to show for it.
Getting the reaction.
Yeah, and it was my own idea.
Now, did people encourage that in you, or did they tell you to shut up and fly right?
My family, for the most part, did. My aunts and uncles, coming from a big New York Italian family, were cousins, aunts, uncles. We were all interacting on a daily basis. In fact, at one point, we lived in a little Bronx row house. It was my grandmother in the bottom apartment, my aunt and cousin in the middle apartment, my family in the upstairs apartment.
Really?
And yes, and we all lived within 10 minutes of each other and, various points in time. And so they were terrifically supportive and encouraging, and they would always, have great fun with my sense of humor. I would still get in trouble for it, but that's sort of the nature of comedy. You get in trouble for it, and people love it. It's those two things have to
then you get
ride
reimbursed.
that edge. Yeah, and then eventually, when it became a profession, it started to show more superficial rewards. But that also is what complicates the art form. I mean, for me, when I started doing it, it was all very, very pure. And over the past handful of years, I've been moving back towards a more pure form.
Now, being raised in the East Coast, New York, did you have any influence from the Catskills and that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Of,
I remember going up to the Catskills for weekends and things like that, and seeing some of the comedians up there. We do family vacations down in Florida, and all those little strip motels on Collins Avenue always had stand-up comedians performing. And yeah, sure.
So you knew that somebody's doing this, and they're making me laugh, but they're also, this is a profession.
Yeah, well, I idolized people like, then as I grew older, Richard Pryor came along, George Carlin, who was a huge impact on me, and several generations of comedians that followed. Robert Klein, and of course Woody Allen in a slightly different form, and Steve Martin came on the scene, and it was clear to me that this was a thing. This could really be a thing.
And did you perform in New York?
I did. I started when I was about 16 at the Improv in New York, when it was the only improv that existed at the time. And there were very few clubs like that in the country. There were really only a handful, and there were 2 in New York.
Caroline's?
No, this was long before Caroline's.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about mid to late 70s. Because I used to go there when I was a kid. I used to go there in high school when I was 15, 16, before they would even, allow me to have a drink or anything. I'd just go and watch the show with friends of mine. And then when I was 16, I went on an open mic night.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We're running out of time with this segment, and I don't know how much time you have, so I'll find that out during the break.
I got a whole life ahead of me.
Because I know you do have to get the soundbar. We're visiting with Paul Provenza. He's blowing on his way into Santa Barbara, which we're going to promote, because if you're watching now, you can still get on the 101 North, and you too can join Paul and have a unique opportunity for the book signing, as well as you might just flash
Satiristas is a book I did with a brilliant photographer named Dan Dione. And this is interviews with 70 comedy artists who work in the realm of subversive or satirical comedy or countercultural comedy or comedy that fights the power, as they say, and everybody from Bill Maher and Stephen Colbert to Tom Lehrer and the Smothers Brothers and all points in between. And we're also doing live shows as well, where lesser-known comedians who do that kind of work, we all coalesce under the Satiristas brand, and we do that whenever we get a chance.
So we'll get into more details about that. You're watching the Maria Sanchez Show. We'll be right back.
Maria's talking, so call Maria. Her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling. There's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria. That's why they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is a show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back to the Maria Sanchez Show. It is Tuesday, November 16th, and we are live. Please mark your calendars. 2 days from today, we're going to be simulcasting President Bush's speech when he's talking at the Reagan Library. It's sold out, but you can get in at www.kadytv.com, and you can watch for yourself. Our pre-show will begin at 5:30, but now we're continuing our conversation in studio with, shall I call you comedian? Do you mind that?
Yeah, that is how I identify.
Okay, comedian Paul Provenza.
More than anything, that's how I identify.
And Paul was kind enough to share about your inspiration and how you started. Then you moved west.
I moved west, yes,
And
after I
that
got out
was-
of college, and I had been working actually as a professional all through college.
Really?
Yeah, since the age of 17, I was making beer money, as they say, doing stand-up. in
Wow.
Little places wherever I could. I at the time there wasn't really a comedy club scene.
Right.
There weren't a lot of places to perform. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania, which had a massive student body, and so myself and a couple of other friends there who were interested in comedy would just do shows in dorm rooms and suites and things, and eventually it started to grow and grow and grow. And so I was already a pro by the time I graduated from college, so I went right into comedy full time.
And when did you move west?
In 1980.
So how long was that? A couple years?
It was about 6 months after I got out of college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So good for you for hanging in there and getting your bachelor's degrees, because most people say, you already know what you want to do. Why would you bother getting, but
That was a bit tormenting. I actually ended up taking a leave of absence and going to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in
Oh
London.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez, are you the Renaissance man?
In that I'm hundreds of years old, yes. And really tattered around the edges.
I love, because people don't think, I know there's a lot of comics that they were funny and so they started, but Jay Leno, Howard Stern, David Letterman, they're all college educated, a lot of them too from Cornell.
Robert Klein was a key figure in that. Robert Klein was the first college-educated comedian who came of age in the 70s, who really sort of wore that proudly. His work was very much from that perspective of somebody who was educated, somebody who he wasn't talking down to an audience. He wanted to make comedy a little bit smarter, a little more erudite. Mm-hmm. And he and George Carlin are probably the two most profound influences on and Richard Pryor, of course, as well. But specifically in that arena, Robert Klein just gave us a paradigm. Everybody who was a college-educated kid had a paradigm for doing comedy. Mm-hmm. To people like them,
Well, and the one thing too, and I guess it was probably in the 70s, there was more the proliferation of a man and a mic, and I don't mean that to be sexist, but
no, absolutely.
It was
yeah,
men.
Yeah.
Which I am the hugest fan of monologists, because it's your words. You're not relying on props and gimmicks and all that.
It is really, really pure. It
Right.
really is. It's just your writing, your words, your performance. There's no director, no producer. There's no advertisers. There's no marketing people. There's no. It really is tremendously pure, and as an art form, it's been very underrated.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I don't think people understand that, because it seems the gimmick guys end up and I keep saying guys, I know, but like the Gallaghers with the smashing of the watermelon, mm-hmm. they end up making a bigger splash initially maybe, but really those of you who do what you do, you have the longevity.
Well,
Harlan, case in point.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do that and still have longevity. I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. But, it's like anything else. When you're talking about big, huge fame and nationwide recognizability, you have to... you have to zero in on that. You have to work at that. Like Larry the Cable Guy, there's an immediate hook. There's immediate identification. It's like any other marketing or merchandising. Mm-hmm. Not everybody works that way. But it's the best analogy is music, really, because when if we talk about music, you intuitively, immediately already know and understand that means millions of different things. There's techno, there's classical, there's rap, there's country western. You name it, you can go on and on for days. Well, that's the same in comedy, but most people don't think of it that way. They think of comedy as just one thing, something that makes you laugh. But there are really lots of different kinds of comedy, and just like in music, there are real artists in music. Then there are also people who just craft a good pop album and sell gajillions of singles and make their name that way. It's the same thing. It's no different. It's a perfect analogy.
It is.
And also, likewise, there are bar bands who aren't doing things that are particularly original, and maybe they make their whole careers on covers and they just enjoy playing and people enjoy hearing them. There's that in comedy as well,
Which I always have a problem with, and somebody has tried to remind me, it's like, you can't measure how somebody gets successful, whether it's through imitation, whether it's through art, whether it's through luck, whether it's through who they know. How you discern it, but it's just like reading. I generally, 98% of my reading is autobiographies or biographies. I think life is much more interesting than fiction.
I agree. I'm very heavy on the nonfiction.
Yeah, it's a rarity that I read fiction. But speaking of books, let's get back to yours. What was the genesis for you for this?
The genesis of this actually was the photographs. Dan Dion is a brilliant portrait photographer. Yes, and I have been an admirer of his, and he's sort of become like the Richard Avedon of the comedy world, in that he specializes in comedians. He has a certain affinities from the comedy world himself, and just comedy speaks to him more than anything else. And as he often puts it, he'd rather photograph Gilbert Gottfried than Kate Moss any day.
Wow.
And his work is just beautiful, and it's very, very subtle, and he just captures really, really special things about performers. He doesn't ask them to do anything gimmicky. It's just beautiful work, and I find it really evocative. I find it's the way a lot of photographers used to photograph jazz musicians back in the 50s, where you just got so many feelings from it. And I loved his work and admired it. And he's been exhibited at the Montreal Just for Laughs Festival, and I happened to be, among many other places, but I happened to be performing in Sydney, Australia, where he was exhibiting as well. And that's when I first met him. And by the end of the first week that we were there together, we decided to do this project.
Nice.
And so I had these very, very intimate comedian-to-comedian conversations with all the people that are represented in the book. And it's not journalistic Q&A, or there was no real agenda to my conversations. We just talked, and then I went through and took pieces of our conversations when you read them all together in sequence, you begin to get narratives, you begin to get ideas, you begin to get ideas and conflicts against those ideas, and you begin to see all the different things and perspectives and ideas that are going on with people who do comedy. We chose Satiristas. We chose people who do confrontational comedy because we feel that they're the most interesting, and they're really working at the highest degree of difficulty.
So, but you're speaking about comedy and satire in terms of performance comedy, not acting comedy?
No, as a matter of fact, there are film directors represented in here, Judd Apatow, Mike Nichols. There are journalists like P.J. O'Rourke, the staff of The Onion. There are a number of different kinds of expressions of stand-up. Billy the Mime is in here. He does amazing work in the form of mime.
Now tell me, do you have time for another segment?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Because I want to get into what this event is in Santa Barbara for folks if they happen to get a wild hair and say, what the heck? What do we have to do?
It's a real treat. The people who are coming up to do this show tonight it's a real treat to Santa Barbara.
Okay, so we'll get into those details, and then as I mentioned, we captured a few snapshots of you from like 4
Ooh.
parts in your career.
Ooh.
No, there's not, and I just thought, well, why don't you let us know what's going on behind this picture? So that's coming next. Paul
right.
Provenza is our in-studio guest. Satiristas is Santa Barbara tonight at what time?
8 o'clock at
8
the
o'clock.
Fresco Cafe.
At the Fresco Cafe. We'll get more details when we come back. You're watching the Maria Sanchez Show right here on KADYTV.com.
Maria's talking, so call Maria. Her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling. There's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria. That's why they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is a show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back. Coming up after this last segment with Paul Provenza, we have Gene Valentino in studios. Gene has had an illustrious career with everything he started with talk radio and all the way up to being a UN correspondent. And he's a Ventura County resident, so we're really pleased to have him and very honored also. And we're continuing our conversation with Paul.
Oh, he's going to be so much more interesting than I am.
So Paul,
I'm killing the cameraman.
yeah, I know, which I love. So you know. Let's do a blurb about tonight, and then I want to get back to your career.
Well, tonight I'll do some readings from Satiristas and signed books. Anybody names that are in the book, who are all brilliant comedians. Rick Shapiro, who is probably the most jazz-like comedian working today. He's extraordinary, with an extraordinary background. Rick Overton, who's an absolute genius. David Feldman, who has multiple Emmys for having written some of the most poignant TV comedy around, everything from Roseanne to the Tonight Show back in the day to I think the Dennis Miller Show.
Wow.
Both sides of the equation there, and
then, so you guys doing improv,
they'll be
ensemble?
performing. I'll be doing some readings,
monology?
and they'll be doing some performance. And
Together,
we
or
hang out.
everybody's going to have a set? Or
You know, everybody will do their own thing, but we tend to play around a lot.
Really?
So that could happen as well.
So now,
It's
is
very
this,
loose in the joints.
I was just going to say, like our program, you fit right in. Is this something that you've done before?
Yes.
Okay.
We've done Satiristas shows on various levels. We've done them in theaters, we've done them in clubs, we've done them in alternative venues. Just basically, really, you know, what we're trying to do is take really, really good, interesting comedy that values artfulness as well as being funny and substance as well as being funny, and taking it sort of out of the typical kind of comedy club format where it's very hard to be
Opening,
really,
middle,
really,
and closing.
yeah, and it's just it's a very hard thing to do comedy of substance in clubs where the primary motivation from the institution itself is to get people drunk and sell as much liquor and chicken wings and quesadillas as possible. You know, and it's really hard to go up and do something that you think is something meaningful to you, that people can relate to, that can possibly shed some new light or some new perspective on important or meaningful things about life, when there's, like, you know, the logo of a dancing chicken with a top hat behind you. You know? So we're just kind of taking it to other places.
Good.
Yeah.
So mention the venue again.
Il Fresco Cafe.
Okay. And so that's at 8 o'clock tonight. So if you feel like it and you want to, I would suggest that you go avail yourself of this. And then, Paul, let's talk about your move west.
Yes.
Did you come for a gig, or you came to get discovered?
Well, it's interesting. I actually got a pilot right out of college.
Wow.
I got out of college, and within a couple of months, I was cast in a pilot, which was shooting here in LA. And that came from the fact that young comedians had been developing at the Improv, and it was a sort of a locus. You know, there were only a few places in the country where that was the case back in the mid to late 70s. And so casting people and networks were always checking in there, and they found me there, and I ended up doing this pilot, and the pilot didn't go. Interestingly enough, my co-star was Charles Fleischer.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
a brilliant comedian.
Which people may know him as the
Voice of Roger Rabbit,
right.
among other things. And the show didn't get picked up, but it seemed like a natural move here. I had already broken through some difficult obstacles for anybody moving west in the
Right.
business, and so I moved. And then proceeded for the next 10, 12, 15 years to be on the road 40 weeks a year.
Which I have a familiarity with that life. I was married to a comic.
Oh, really?
We knew each other in that life. That was in the early 80s. And he was...
Did I do anything wrong? It wasn't me. It was out of town.
I was married.
It was
at
Wayne
the
Cotter.
time.
We looked alike.
He was a headliner, and that was with the proliferation of the comedy clubs.
Right.
And so you could go to the Last Stop and then Chuckles and then the whatever, and all over the country and get a nice wage, especially if you're a headliner.
Yeah, and if you did the Tonight Show, or you did Letterman, or you got enough, or you got some sort of a recurring thing on television, or were popping up on television, you could sell out pretty much any gig, and so then people started getting commensurate money with what they were worth to, putting bums in seats, as they say. And and then the whole business changed, and it was the first time the comedy club boom of the 80s is the first time there was ever a middle class in comedy.
Mm-hmm.
You were either tremendously successful
Right.
and made a really good living all year round, or you were struggling.
Right,
And
like
all
the
of a
Buddy
sudden-
Hackett's and the
Right.
in Vegas and
Sure.
Residence and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But what the other double-edged sword about being on the road was, yes, you're selling out seats and you're making good money, but you were away from your family or from your home or from auditions for
Exactly.
other
With
pilots,
other
which were
stuff.
going to keep you and your fame.
And in the 80s, that mattered to a lot of people, because there were a lot of people who got into comedy sort of after it had already crested, after it became an alternative, actual job
Right.
opportunity. It wasn't for people who started before the comedy boom. But eventually, by the mid-'80s, if you were somebody who was pulling down 600 a week, loading heavy objects onto trucks, you could sit back and go, you know what, I can get enough laughs to where I can make 700 a week and not have to lift a thing.
Right.
And suddenly people got opportunities from that sort of motivation, as well as people who always dreamed of having a sitcom or being a movie star or whatever the case may be, and they started to use stand-up as a way into that,
Right.
with pluses and minuses. One of my favorites to come out of that was Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton was a stand-up for a very small window of time, and he was terrific. He had a terrific 15, 20 minutes of material, and then as soon as he took off, the stand-up fell away, But a lot of people just sort of did it as a stepping stone, and that has contributed a lot, I think, to the fact that people don't really see it as the kind of art form with as much depth and range as it can have, and has, with a lot of people doing a lot of work all the time. People just aren't aware of it, I think, because we've had several generations of people who just saw it as a stepping stone.
Which it speaks then about there's not much art. I don't want to say that they're not talented, but it's a different mentality. It's a
like
journeyman
anything else.
mentality.
There are two kinds of comedians, really, ultimately. There are ones who are creating art, and there are ones who are creating merch.
Right.
The ones who are just selling their product,
Right.
their comedy, they're making, doing their business, and the ones who have something else in mind as well, which I think is true pretty much in any form.
Yeah,
Really.
it is. Now let's look at these pictures and tell us what we're looking at. If Rod, you can show us the first picture,
You
please.
know what's behind
Yeah.
these pictures. Well, that was the guy to my right there had a bad clam right before this picture was taken. He was a little pale. That's actually Penn Jillette, Sarah Silverman, Billy the Mime, and myself at the Aristocrats premiere in Los Angeles. The film that Pam and I did on the filthiest joke in the world,
Okay.
which you haven't seen.
I haven't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, thank you.
We might not have this interview again after you see that.
And then this picture here.
I can't see.
That looks like you're in the
that's,
same attire, huh? Oh, that's Matt Stone,
Yeah, it's Matt
and
Stone
Trey Parker.
and Trey Parker and John Stamos.
There, you're right. And that's Matt Stone
Yes.
and Trey Parker from South Park.
This was on the set of a gay porn that we all seem to be getting
Chummy,
ready for.
chummy.
My memory's not exactly.
It's okay.
exactly
Let's get to
right.
another one so we don't run out of time. There you are doing your stand-up.
Yeah, that's from I believe that's from a special I did on Comedy Central many years ago
Damn, you haven't aged then.
Oh, aren't you kind? What do you need? A couple of bucks? You need something? Let me help you with.
And here you are, Paul the Man.
Yeah, that was actually that was at the Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget, and I felt compelled to wear a Bob Saget T-shirt,
I see
which
that.
I had anyway. And the interesting thing about
He
Bob
just
Saget,
performed here at the Ventura Theater.
he's hilarious. But I've known Bob Saget since 1975. That's when I met him. He was at Temple University in Philadelphia when I was at Penn in Philadelphia, and he was one of those people interested in doing comedy when there wasn't a comedy scene. So I would put together these shows, and he was in a team at the time with a friend of mine at Penn. And so Bob Saget actually auditioned for me
Oh my.
in 1975, and I never let him forget that.
Good. Long memories. So, and then in terms, I wanted to also let our viewers know that you have been proponents of live performances.
Yeah, and they do some great work there. I was privileged and honored to do a handful of 2 or 3 productions there, and loved every minute of it. It's a great group of people, and that's people who they're really doing it for love.
Yeah.
You know,
And that came through. And I mean, we had such a great conversation with them.
and they have a relationship with the community as well.
Yeah.
They feel like they're doing something that they have a certain responsibility to the community. And their Fiddler on the Roof, I guess it was last year, was just magnificent. It was just great. I recommend people supporting it.
Yeah.
It's right in your
walking
backyard.
distance,
Yeah.
From here. Now, before we take the break, Satiristas is readily available.
Yes,
Amazon.
available on Amazon and bookstores,
And tonight at
El Fresco
At El
at 8
Fresco.
o'clock.
So you still have time. See, because live TV, it's 4:30, and so you can hit the road with Paul.
Maybe I'll go
Or you just lead a caravan.
I'll just wait here. If anybody wants to come, just meet me here. We'll all go. I'll get some mozzarella sticks.
There we go. So, Paul, I hope you won't be a stranger to the program.
I hope not. I hope I'm invited more.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Great.
having me.
You're welcome. Paul Provenza, comedian / /hyphenate / about anything else that you can
In
mention.
fact, I'm moving in.
Yes,
This
exactly.
couch is so
Good,
comfy.
actually.
I think I'm just going to crash here for a while. This is good.
Tell me when it started. Was it you were 7?
My mother never understood me, Doctor. Doctor, sometimes I get the feeling you're not really listening to me.
When we come back, Gene Valentino will be our in-studio guest, and you are watching the Maria Sanchez Show right here on KADYTV.com. Don't go anywhere. Thank you.
Where's the remote?